Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around this whole world. This is Michael Lilborn Williams coming to you live from the Queen City, right here in Clarksville, Tennessee. Frozen Clarksville, Tennessee. I don't know why we have to do this just for 1 week every year. It's like, can we do without this week? Last year it came in December. This year it came in January. But by the end of the week, it's going to be 60 degrees. So I think I can endure. I've been trying to get Daniel to feel sorry for me, but he just won't. He just calls me all kinds of names. Listen, there's been something on my mind. There's been a lot of things on my mind. One of those things, though, that keeps coming back, I was actually watching a TV show, and in it had nothing to do with spirituality whatsoever, but it came to one of those points in a family where that even if you're not spiritual, you become spiritual for a little while, and you quote Psalms 23, right? Because that's all about us. That's all about us going through the valley of the shadow of death. And thanks for playing. No, it's not. Oh, don't miss the big thing by settling for the little thing. Don't miss the true thing by settling for something pseudo. We don't want anything. We've found pseudo everything everywhere. And we don't want the fake. We don't want the phony. We don't want the replacement. We want the real deal. In the New Testament, there's many things. We're going to go back and read Psalms 23 again. And but before we do, I want to point out a couple of things. As this was being read, and I got right to the end of it, it's like, well, of course. It's terrible that you have to just watch a plain old, I'm binge watching something. And where that they get so desperate they have to read Psalms 23. You know, that's a good thing to binge watch, when they get so desperate they have to read and quote Psalms 23. You know, it's a good, exciting movie, right? So this whole upside down thing about the indwelling of God in us, instead of us trying to be a part of God, the whole process was God becoming a part of us. And of course, once integrated, who can tell which is one and which is the other? Are we in him? Is he in us? Like Don said, I can't tell where I begin and God ends, and vice versa. I think I'm still stuck in the same predicament that Don was. And but you know, in John chapter 14, I was speaking with someone in my family actually just earlier today. It might have been yesterday. The days have run together because my grandson has been visiting, and believe me, days run together. That is for sure. But he's gone back home, and in fact, on the drive back down here, taking him back up to where he lives and driving back home, this was going through my mind. And I remembered hearing this being quoted on the movie. And, you know, in the New Testament, John chapter 14, as I said, I'd been also talking with one of my relatives, which is always exciting when, you know, one of your own relatives start listening to you. I know some of you know that is a very special thing, because I hear the heartbreak in the stories. Goodness gracious, Sean Smith, what a wonderful human being. And he's just coming out more and more with what he actually believes. And of course, Sean is a disabled veteran. He has served his country. He's just one of the most wonderful human beings you could ever meet. However, within his family, they've found out what he believes, and he is not being revered highly. Let's put it that way. And of course, that's a heartache, and you might want to start quoting Psalms 23 when your family finally finds out you believe that the whole world is redeemed. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. These are very serious things, but you know, gosh, you've got to find humor somewhere along the way. Back to John chapter 14 is what I was sharing with one of my relatives, and they were talking about, the mansions in John chapter 14. And Jesus saying, I go to prepare a place for you. And the word mansion, in my Father's houses are many mansions. That's verse 2 of John chapter 14. And then it's really funny that it gets down to the end of John chapter 14, and he says, my Father and I will come and make our abode with you. So suddenly we've stopped talking about mansions, and we're talking about abodes. And because he said he's going to come and dwell in us and make his abode in us. And many years ago, we found out that the word abode is the exact same Greek word as the word mansion. So the whole conclusion of that teaching in John chapter 14, from beginning all the way to the end, was the fact that the real secret about this, the real understanding or the mystery hidden in this, which Jesus was always trying to help us understand this mystery, was that the dwelling place and the place that he wanted to come and abide, he and the Father, that we were the mansion. You are the mansion. My goodness, what a wonderful time that was. If we'd have been in church, we'd have been dancing all over the place, but we'd already gone. It says, and then we know that 1 Corinthians teaches us, as remember how Daniel and I went through that and we translated all this material. And it says that you are the temple. Wasn't it wonderful to find out that according to the Greek and the context of not only just the location, but of every other place in the whole Bible, God is not going to destroy the temple because something bad got in. He destroys the bad thing that got into the temple. That is the precedent, and that is what happened, and that's what God said. He said that anything that defiles the temple, that will God destroy. Now, of course, that all is something that took place at the cross. Everything that was there to defile the temple of God, which is you, know ye not, know ye not, you are the temple. Remember, we used to sing that. And then, of course, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul is instructing and helping us understand you are God's building. So we're called the mansion, we're called the temple, and we're called the building. So there's probably some other places that I've missed, but suffice it to say we have another trifecta going on here. You are his mansion, you are his temple, and you are his building, according to these three teachings out of John and 1 Corinthians. So now I want to go back and read Psalms 23. We'll probably stop and remind ourselves just a little bit about what we've learned out of Psalms 23. And the thing that we must remember first off is one of the key ingredients to understanding the scriptures is they are not about you. They're about Jesus. Wow, what an eye-opening experience just having that one paradigm shift. Now, you say, Michael, how do you know that they are all about Jesus? How do you know? It's easy for you to say. How do you know that they're all about Jesus? Because Jesus said they were all about him. So I think that that's the final authority on it as far as I'm concerned. Others don't seem to be impressed with what Jesus had to say, but I am, which makes me much better than them, right? No, I'm trying to find some way to be better than everybody else. But that in the kingdom of God just does not fly. You know, even Jesus said about John the Baptist being the very last priest and prophet of the old covenant, and the one who was the forerunner to Christ. And Jesus said, even though this man is the greatest man that's ever lived, said, but compared to those in the kingdom, he's just barely a blip on the wall. Man, what happened when Jesus brought us all into his kingdom? And to where that all of these people from the past, it wouldn't have been just John the Baptist, but everyone else became, they without us could not be made perfect. Isn't that an incredible thing for us to be told that all of these great people of the hero Hall of Famers of faith, that they without us would never have entered into perfection? We always have a lot to say about perfection. There's only two ways to find it, and one is through the law, and one is through the cross. Oh my goodness. And but we have understood that the cross, and it's yours, even if you hadn't found it, it has found you. Now let me get to Psalms 23 like I promised you. So now when we read this, I want you to stop and arrest yourself and stop thinking it's about you, because immediately when I start, you're going to go to woe is me. Yeah, that's right. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. No, it's not about you. This is Jesus. And Jesus saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still. I've never laid down in a green pasture. I've laid down beside some still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. We've been doing some research in all of this thing about the path and the gate and the narrow and the straight and the narrow. And oh my goodness, what an amazing thing that we have. You'll get a second dose of that on Friday. We went into more detail about this incredible thing that we learned concerning the in the book of Matthew about straight is the gate and narrow is the way. Please make sure you listen in on Friday also. Please don't think that, oh, I've heard this, because we go into things we did not know and we got the pants chopped off of us as we were doing it. That'd be worth watching too, right? Then he says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now, what we found out, of course, and this is recapping just a bit before we go to the end of this, that the valley of the shadow of death is a very specific place according to the prophets. It is the place in which Jesus was born, raised, lived, taught, and died. So when Jesus, he said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And that's what we learn about the whole life of Jesus, is that he was never without the Father. He said, I never say anything unless the Father instructs me. And this valley of the shadow of death, what a powerful insight and understanding we gained by going into the scriptures and finding out where that valley was. It's called the valley of the shadow of death. And the region is given specifically based on two tribes, and it covers the entire region of the ministry, the vast majority of it, of the region, including Jerusalem, the region where Jesus carried out his ministry and his death and his birth. I did that backward. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. I hope you remember that one, that we finally realized that that was the Lord's Supper. Remember, he talked about the one who lifted up his heel at his enemies. But Jesus did not die for his friends. Jesus died for his enemies. He declared all to be his enemies before he went to the cross. And when he sat down in the presence of that table, God prepared a table. This was the Last Supper, which was the only thing that really is vitally important to be worth being mentioned in the scriptures, is this Passover meal. And what he is saying is that God prepared a Passover meal for him in the presence of his enemies. Wow. And boy, did they demonstrate themselves to be his enemies. But aren't you glad that Jesus died for his enemies? When I first saw that, it's like, I am never going to get by with saying the disciples were Jesus's enemies. But you see, the whole world was Jesus' enemies when he went to the cross. That was the only way it could be. All were in unbelief. All were his enemies. And it was declared to be so by God. All were in unbelief. All were in sin, so that God could have mercy upon all. He corralled all into one category so that he could bring them all out in one single act through the work of the cross. This is better news than you're paying for. Come on. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. This actually took place when with Jesus. I think then the context of this, this woman was not of the most reputable reputation, and Jesus, and in this particular passage, it is referring to that time when Jesus was anointed with oil by her, and my cup runneth over. Then he says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and then I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's not about you. Part of this is about you. Jesus said the result of all of this is going to be one thing. Remember, you're the mansion, John 14. Remember, 1 Corinthians, you are the temple. Remember, 1 Corinthians 3:9, you're God's building. And what did Psalms say that Jesus was speaking and saying about this? He said, I will dwell, I will live in the house of the Lord forever. God built this house. He made it out of you, and he made it out of me. He made it out of the entire world. And yes, indeed, Jesus dwells in the house of the Lord. And he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you.